That's why when you have a cold, your nose is stopped up, you really can't taste your food, can you? It's because it's mostly smell. So if you could smell the dirt in the air, you should be able to taste it in the air. Except you guys can't. I don't know what's wrong with you guys. Okay, so we're in 7th period. They have a crappy nervous system. They can't smell or taste anything, so I'm sorry for them. Set up your page of notes so you can take notes here. We're doing 4B today. You guys have your pages set up yet? Just waiting on me? So forever, everyone's going to know that you guys have crappy senses of smell and taste. And they're a little they have a lack of sense of humor. Just saying, see, you heard it, almost nothing. Nothing out there. They can't even say hello or something funny to you people. Yeah, you keep dreaming. So this is period 7, the dull class. Got one that'll ask some questions. Yeah, there are a couple of you guys that have popped some questions up every once in a while, but mostly you sit there and stare at me like, will this ever end? Yeah, no, it's never going to end. You've only made it halfway through. I'm going to follow you guys. What else do I need on here? Oh, what's today? There we go. Okay, so this is B4B, and again, we're going to split it up into 2 pieces. And it's not because the teak is incredibly long, it's because the stuff it's talking about, there's a lot to it. So it makes more sense if I split it up into 2 days. So the teak says you're going to investigate, which that's one of our labs we're going to do, which you slackers at home don't get to do. Investigate and explain cellular processes including homeostasis and transport molecules, the transport of molecules. Remember, molecules I'm abbreviating, but you don't care right now because we're not going to cover this part today. So it's a really short teak, but it's got a lot of stuff in it. It's got some really heavy-duty material in here that we're going to talk about. So homeostasis, the first thing that we have on here, and really what we're going to talk about. So homeostasis and if we look at that word homeostasis and split it up and just basically translate it from the Latin, and you guys know the prefix homo means same, so the stasis means state. So when we look at this, it means same or steady state. So I'm going to put same because that's the prefix meaning you're most familiar with, because you guys all know the word homosexual, and you usually make some weird look to each other when I say that, like, oh, she can't say that word out loud. So it's same state. The better definition, though, and I'm going to give you a couple of definitions. For me, the best definition that I can come up with is always going to be short, but very specific. So when I look at the word homeostasis, I think maintaining equilibrium. So if I put this on your free response and I say, I give you like a multiple choice section or a matching section, if I'm writing it, I'm going to write down, homeostasis is the choice of words, and I'm going to put maintaining equilibrium as the definition, because that makes a lot of sense to me, and especially since I'm writing it, I get to do that. You won't see that on the STAR test because they get a massive number of people writing the questions, so you never know what phrases they tend to use a lot, so it's not quite the same thing going on here. So when we talk about homeostasis, another way to think of it is as a balanced state. Remember when I told you to stand on one foot? The balance doesn't mean it's perfectly still. It means that it's steady. It kind of goes up above the balance. You wobble just a little bit on that one foot, just kind of slightly modifying it the whole time. Or when we did that graph where here's the steady one state and then you went above the line and below the line, back and forth, that's how homeostasis really works. It's a balanced state. It doesn't mean it's still, not changing. It's constantly changing and being modified. It's a regulation of an organ's internal environment. Another way to say this, another way to define it, internal environment. Remember environment? I abbreviate that as ENVR. So it's the regulation of an organism's internal environment to maintain conditions needed to live. Not everybody, not every organism has the exact same conditions that are required, but it's to maintain the conditions needed for life. Different types of organisms need different conditions, right? If you're a fern plant, you're going to need lots and lots and lots of water, as opposed to something, say, like a cactus, who, if you gave them as much water as you gave to ferns, it would kill it. So different organisms require different maintenance, or they require different things in order to survive, and it just depends on what organism it is, what you're talking about. There are some basic things that we can kind of see, oh yeah, we've got to maintain a certain temperature, but dogs, you guys have dogs at home? Do dogs have the same standard temperature that humans have? No, don't they run a little hotter? Am I right on that? They run a little bit hotter than that? So even when we say, well, we're all mammals here, it's still not even the exact same thing. So what we say is, hey, we have to regulate the body temperature, but what that average body temperature is depends on the organism that we're talking about. But all of them are going to have to somehow maintain that body temperature there. So we've got all these conditions for life that we need to maintain, and that's what that is. So there are several things that we're going to talk about just in passing. And so one of those things that we maintain is a temperature balance. And believe it or not, your body doesn't stay exactly 98.6. Okay, so first of all, remember 98.6 is not really the average human temperature. And if you've taken your temperature, like last year when we all left for COVID, the teachers were able to come up here like twice a week. And every time we came into the building, the first thing we had to go do is take our temperature. So we had one of those little thermal things that you put at your forehead and take the temperature. And so 2 days a week, we always took our temperature. So I realized that, hey, my temperature isn't even close to 98.6. It runs about 97.9. Kept popping that one up over and over and over again. And so you know that you can get a steady temperature from that. It's not going to be exactly that all throughout the day. I mean, when you first get up out of bed, isn't it warm and cozy in bed? Your body's all warm and toasty, so that's probably going to be one of your warmer temperatures. As you go throughout the day, especially when it's cold outside, obviously you're going to get cooler. I mean, my hands right now are cold. So they're not even close to 98 or 97 degrees at all. Whereas my core body temperature would be much closer to that, right? Because when we talk about maintaining body temperature, it's mostly for our organs. So if we still have to maintain in the realm of that, but mostly our organs and our brain, that's where our best and most steady temperature is. Because your extremities are always going to be colder. Right now, are your hands cold right now? Do you put them on your face and you feel they're colder? Some of you guys? Yeah, so you can tell, obviously, my hands aren't the same temperature as my face or my neck, because we talk about our neck being that temperature. So you can tell that. So you can have different temperatures, but there's a range where if my hands get too cold, then they can actually, the tissue starts to die, which would not be a good thing. So we talk about frostbite. Yeah, frostbite doesn't have to be something that, oh my gosh, it's negative 10 degrees below zero out there. It can happen in temperatures like this even, as long as you're not getting blood down to your tissues, then it's going to get colder. So when you're in a cold environment, even just a cooler environment, in order to maintain that temperature in your core and your head, one of the things your body does is it limits the blood flow to your extremities. It keeps the blood, the warm blood, keeps it in the torso and the head, so it keeps it in the core. So when you get too hot, do you notice that when you're exercising or whatever, your hands get red, your face gets red? Yes, notice that? Yeah, sometimes even your skin gets red. If you have real pale skin, you can see it. That's because now all the little blood vessels in your body are open as much as possible, so that all the hot blood, as the temperature is getting hot, it goes to the surface, and so you give off the heat back. You help to maintain your body temperature by doing that. So there are several ways that your body can do that. Some animals can sweat, some can't, right? Pigs don't sweat. What do they do instead? Yeah. You got to make sure they're going to roll in the mud or the dirt to kind of put it on there and kind of protect their bodies from the sunlight, so it puts a layer on in between there, almost like a sunscreen in a sense. So different animals are going to do different things than that. So we maintain a temperature balance. We also maintain an oxygen balance. Okay, so with all the stuff about COVID out, one of our science teachers, her dad died yesterday from COVID. And she was talking about how they had been monitoring his oxygen level in his blood. And so his oxygen level would go up to 80, which is good. It's not the best, but it's good. And then it would drop down to 40 parts per million, something along those lines. So it was going up and down like crazy, so he couldn't maintain enough oxygen in his blood. And so we have an oxygen balance to maintain. Your body usually measures like how much carbon dioxide, we talked a little bit about that. So it actually measures carbon dioxide, but for us, on our tests that we run, we measure the amount of oxygen in the blood, and that's how we, looking on the outside, that's how we look and see, well, how's your body doing here? So we maintain an oxygen balance. We maintain a sugar balance, right? Don't you talk about I'm tired, I'm run down, I have low blood sugar? Yes or no? Have you heard that? Yeah. Now yours is gonna, just like that graph we did, yours is gonna go up and down all throughout the day. Like right now, you've had about an hour after your lunch, right? So your sugar level, if you ate lunch, did you eat lunch? Or did you just drink a soda or something? So you ate lunch, and your sugar level should go up, and then now it's kind of just slow. It should still be up pretty high, and it's kind of slowly going down. So by the time of about, 4:30 or 5, it should drop really low again. Aren't you usually really hungry when you get home from school? Yeah, usually when you get home from school, you're really hungry because that's when your blood sugar level is lowest. And that's how your body tells you to eat. It says, hey, your blood sugar is level, so you feel hungry. And sometimes we have, sometimes instead of waiting for our blood sugar to tell us that we're hungry, instead we say, that smells good, I think I'll eat that. Or, my stomach, I haven't eaten in a while, I better go eat something. So we don't wait until our body tells us what it is. We actually kind of say, oh, look, there's a Twinkie. You know? So we in the U.S., we have plenty of food in most cases, so we like to just say, oh, that tastes so good, I think I'll eat that now. And your body says, oh my gosh, that's great energy, there's no way I'm getting rid of it, I might need it someday when I'm starving. So all that sugar we took in, it keeps, and it changes it into a lightweight storage form called fat. And so it packs it around your body, so in case there's some day when you're starving, you have access to energy. So you can survive for quite a while on that. How handy for you. Okay, so these three things we talk about balances. There's another one that's weird. And so you probably haven't discussed this in your other classes, or it won't make as much sense. Osmotic balance. That's a T. Okay, let me fix it. Okay, so osmotic balance. Osmotic balance. Okay, so did you see that Osmosis Jones? Anybody know that cartoon, Osmosis Jones? Okay, so here is your assignment for this weekend. Go home, watch Osmosis Jones. Write that down. Osmosis, you'll like it, it's funny. Osmosis Jones. Okay, go watch that cartoon. So we maintain an osmotic balance. All right. Osmotic balance is talking about the correct concentration Okay, and I'm going to pause right there for a second. Correct concentration. So when we talk about concentration, when I teach AP Chem, I have one of the labs we're doing, I have 3 molar hydrochloric acid. So the 3M, 3 molar, stands for the concentration. How much hydrochloric acid did I dissolve in the water? I have 0.1 molar sodium thiosulfate over here. So I have different things. I have to know what concentration they are. So your body has stuff dissolved inside the cell and outside the cell. And so we have to maintain a balance of those dissolved things. So osmotic pressure is talking about maintaining the correct concentration. And in chemistry, and you guys will get this abundance of this next year when you take chemistry, when you talk about concentration, stuff is in square brackets. So when you see something in square brackets in a science class, it's talking about concentration. So the correct concentration of substances inside and outside the cell. And I'm going to add a little bit to it. It's inside and outside, not just the cell, but the cell membrane. So here is, there's a cell, and there's a cell next to it, right? And there's a cell next to it, right? Oh, they're touching, they shouldn't be touching. So there's a cell next to it over here. There is a gap of stuff between these cells. So you know you've got cytoplasm in here. Well, you've also got liquidy stuff here. It's more runny outside here. Inside, it's like that jello-like stuff that we talked about. The cytoplasm, it's got less moisture, but here it's a little runnier, so it can move around. You can think of it kind of like, you know when you pop a zit and the white stuff comes out? That's dead bacteria, dead white blood cells and stuff. And then you squeeze it some more, and there's this clear liquid comes out. And don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about either. You've all had zits before. So this clear liquid comes out, and that's lymph. And a lot of times that's what the interstitial fluids, interstitial between the cells, that's what they look like in here. So it's more of a clear liquid, but it still has a lot of stuff dissolved in it. Now remember, you also have blood vessels, little capillaries that are going in and around close to these things too. But you have spaces between those. We have to make sure that the concentration of substances here outside the cell membrane and here inside the cell membrane are balanced. Because we have lots of crap dissolved in both places, and we need a balance there. Okay, so I used to do this lab that was awesome. Can't do it anymore, but when I was first teaching, we did a lab. So I would have my students poke their finger with a needle, and then they would take the blood and they would put it on a slide, and they'd look at it through the microscope, so you could see your own blood cells. And then what we'd do is, while the cells are alive, what we'd do is we'd take a drop of salt water and put it on the cells. Okay? Have any of you guys taken salt and put it on a slug or a snail? Do you know what I'm talking about? Anybody? When you do that, they don't have the same type of skin, dead tissues like we have. They have a mucus around them. So when you put salt on it, what happens is the salt can't go through the membrane easily. So what happens is all of the water inside the cells, the slug's cells, go outside to try and water down the salt to make it equal concentrations inside and outside the cell. So what happens is all the water leaves the slug and he dies. When we put salt water on those blood cells, same thing happens. The salt water can't get through the cell membrane, so the water that's inside the red blood cells moves out into the salt water, trying to dilute it so they get equal concentrations inside and outside, and it ends up your cell just shrivels up. It's like all the moisture is lost out of it. It dries up and shrivels up. We do the same thing then. They take another drop and they put it on there, and instead of putting salt water on there, what they do is they put distilled water, plain water. Okay? Nothing but water. And in that case, what happens, again, only the water moves in and out. So the water on the outside is almost pure. The water on the inside of the cell has a lot of stuff dissolved in it. So the water moves into the cell, trying to get the concentrations of stuff inside and outside equal. So all this water moves into the cell. What happens to the cell? Yeah, it expands, blows up. It just like a water balloon that's too full of water, it blows up. And so we have these things where there has to be maintained a balance. So the cell has just the right amount of stuff inside. The concentration, like how much stuff is dissolved inside here compared to the stuff dissolved outside here, has to be maintained the same. Homeostasis. So you have that osmotic pressure maintaining the same stuff there. Okay, before you can fully kind of understand what's going on with this, you need to understand a couple of the terms that we're talking about here. And the first one is diffusion. Every single one of you guys should know what diffusion is. So turn to your people. One person, you've got a person on either side of you. Turn to a person next to you and define diffusion. Tell them what diffusion is. If you know what it is, tell them what it is. If you can't put it in words, try and give an example. Okay, I'm hearing a little bit that you're on the right track. What are you saying? What is somebody saying? Somebody tell me. Say it again. Mixing, okay. Somebody said something over here too. The spread of something, so you're mixing it out, you're spreading it out. You're really close in there. Diffusion is more specific. It's the movement of molecules from an area of greater concentration where they're all packed in, it spreads out to an area of lesser concentration. Does that make sense? Okay, so movement of molecules. Notice we're talking about chemicals, right? Okay, if I do this, write the word greater, and I put it in square brackets. What does that mean? How do I read that? Greater concentration to an area of lesser, and I put that in square brackets. How does that read? Lesser concentration. Okay, now turn to your people now. See if you can come up with an example of diffusion. An actual example of diffusion. Now, when you think of this, notice it's the movement of molecules. Someone said earlier, well, what about communism? No, it's the movement of molecules. And then someone said, well, what about when a disease travels from person to person? No, movement of molecules. You got to take the definition in the science way, not how you can use it in an English class or anything like that, but you're focused on the science. And a lot of times the definitions in science are very, very narrow and limited. We like it that way. And you get into your English class and they come up with all sorts of things here. So can somebody give me an example? What? It's not the crickets. No? I'm going to have to update my popsicle sticks and I'm going to sticking you guys with that. Okay, so when I was teaching 7th grade, it never failed, every year. Every year there'd be some little girl in the back of the room who'd try to sneak out a bottle of fingernail polish and try and paint her nails in the back of the room. How long did it take for everybody to figure out what was going on? Yeah. That's diffusion. All those molecules were inside the bottle. The minute she opens the lid, those gas molecules come out and they spread. They diffuse throughout the room. Movement of molecules from an area of greater concentration to an area of lesser concentration. Okay, so let's say you get home today and someone's making their chocolate chip cookies in the oven. You open your front door, what happens? You smell, even though the chocolate chip cookies are not at your door, the gases, and we live in a gaseous environment, so it's usually things changing to gases, and they spread. So the gases move from an area of greater concentration in the oven, and they spread throughout the house, didn't they? Yeah, that's diffusion. Okay, a more gross example. Somebody passes gas. Yeah, flatulence. Is there a scientific word for you? Somebody. Not quite the same. You're talking energy there, so it's a little bit different. But you're in the realm, yeah? But something like that. All of those things, the movement of the molecules. So when we talk about energy, it's a transfer of energy from one area to another. So it's not the same as diffusion. So in energy transfer, like you open the fridge and the cold comes out, what's happening there is the molecules that were in the refrigerator aren't moving out. They are bumping other molecules. Anyway, with the diffusion, the molecules actually move from that bottle of fingernail polish all the way out. From somebody's anus all the way out. So when you smell something like that, those molecules from his butt or her butt are in your nose. Think about that. Science is a beautiful thing. You could have gone your whole life without thinking about that, right? Yeah. Okay, so the first word is diffusion. This is a definition you just need to have in your brain. Movement of molecules from an area of greater amount to an area of lesser amount. A greater concentration to an area of lesser concentration. The next word is one that you don't usually talk about until you talk about it in biology, and that word is osmosis. It is a type of diffusion. And when you have osmosis, it's diffusion. So it's the diffusion, I need to fix this. It's the diffusion of water through a semi-permeable membrane. Ooh, semi-permeable. Another word for semi-permeable membrane would be, what kind of membrane are we studying this section? A cell membrane. Semi-permeable, again, means that it just doesn't let everything through. In this case of osmosis, the only thing going in and out is the water. And this all happens without energy. You don't have to supply the energy. This is naturally going to happen. You have to, if you want it to not happen, you have to apply some energy. I mean, seriously, you open the bottle of fingernail polish, the only way you can keep it from happening, you can't cup the gas molecules around there and try and keep it from happening. You might if you can maybe put it in something that's totally, completely sealed off, but then, just close the lid. You can't hold those molecules back. It naturally happens. Osmosis, you can't hold it back. Water's going to move in and out no matter what. So it moves in and out through that semi-permeable membrane. It requires no energy. Diffusion, you don't have to put energy into it. It's just going to happen. Okay? So osmosis is a kind of diffusion, so it's going to move through there. The next thing I want to talk about is the concentration gradient. And the reason I want you to write this down is because you'll see these phrases on the STAR test. You'll see them in different areas. So you need to be aware of when they throw some phrases at you that it doesn't throw you off so badly that you're thinking, I have no idea what they're talking about. So concentration gradient. That word gradient in this case means like a hill or a slide downward. So when we say gradient, it's when we talk about that movement from a greater concentration to a lesser concentration. That's a concentration gradient. Always from a greater concentration to a lesser. That's your slide. From greater, it slides down to lesser concentration. So you guys use the word spread when you do that. Just be more specific now. It's the spread of molecules from a greater amount where they're all cluttered up together, and it spreads out to a lesser amount. So that's what it means when it says concentration gradient. Now, the reason that's important is because tomorrow or Tuesday, we're going to talk about these transports, the transportation of molecules up here. That's the other part of it. And the way that molecules get transported is by a concentration gradient. If we have a concentration gradient, if we go with that, we don't require energy for it. But if we want to put molecules in and it's against the concentration gradient, like, hey, we've got all the sodium ions here, we want to stick more of them in here. Well, they're naturally going to want to move from where they all are to someplace else, to spread out, diffuse. But we can't let that happen. We need them all in there. And so we have to apply energy to push those against the concentration gradient. It's kind of like going uphill. You have to have the energy to go uphill. If I take this pen and I put it on a slant, I don't have to add any energy to get it to go down the hill, right? It's going to go on its own. However, if I wanted to go up the hill, I have to put energy to go up the hill. So when we talk about a concentration gradient, if we go against the concentration gradient, we have to put energy into it to get it to do that. And you have things going in and out of your cells all the time. It's got to be a constant process. You saw all of those chemical reactions that were going on inside the body. It takes a lot of things to make sure everything's going on the way it should be going. Okay, so when I say gradient right here, you can put, if you put the word slope, do you know what that is? Yes? Slope, hill, slide. Now, when we talk about homeostasis, there are two metabolic pathways that are incredibly important, big dogs of them all. Every single biology class you have on the planet will always talk about these things, and you'll have to know the exact same things whether you're in Spain or China or Russia. You're going to have to know this stuff. So the first of these metabolic pathways is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is, and you guys should know what this is. You should be able to get some kind of little definition on your own, right? I'm going to write my definition. You should be able to write one of your own on there. This is the production of food using energy from the sunlight. And where does it happen? What's the organelle? Occurs in the chloroplasts because they have what chemical in them? Chlorophyll. If you don't have the chlorophyll, then it's not going to be green. So there are other pigments in there, but we don't care about those. Chlorophyll is the big dog. And I say in the chlorophyll, it's actually using that pigment for it to happen. So the equation for that, and I'm going to leave some blanks so you can balance this equation. So the plants take in carbon dioxide, they take in water, and I'm going to put this as one of the reactants, even though it's not matter, it's energy. And they take in energy, and in this case, they take it in the form of sunlight, right? Or light of some kind. They have to have that. If you don't have this energy, this whole thing's not going to happen. Sometimes they'll take this sunlight or the energy from the sunlight and they'll put it on top of the arrow. Have you guys seen it like that? I want to put it here as a reactant so that you pay attention to what it is here, and when we flip it over, it's going to make more sense to you. And we're going to form C6H12O6 and oxygen. Here, that's our food. That's the food. So the plants make their food, then they're going to eat their food, right? The opposite of this, so here's making the food. The opposite of that is eating the food, and that's called cellular respiration. So here we have photosynthesis, and then here, the next one down will be cellular respiration. Now, cellular respiration is the production of energy. So look at this. We used energy to make the food. Now we're going to take the food and break it apart, and we're going to get the energy back out. So it's a way of taking sunlight and harnessing that energy to create food. Then we can take that food and harness the energy out of that, and we get it in a different form. Not light anymore, but it'll actually be chemical energy. Energy that's stored in the bonds between molecules or between atoms here. So cellular respiration is the production of energy from the food that you're eating or that the plants just made. Where does it happen? Mitochondria. You knew that, didn't you? On the inside of the mitochondria, and it's in all eukaryotic cells. So what's the equation? Well, we take this equation, we run it backwards. So here, these were products up here, so let's make them reactants. So here it is, C6H12O6 plus the oxygen. We eat our food, we breathe in the oxygen, and here, our reactants here become the products, and we blow out carbon dioxide, water, and here's the thing that we want, energy. And this energy, instead of being in the form of light, because you don't eat food and digest it and shine light out your eyeballs, do you? No. This type of energy, now instead of being light energy, it's chemical energy, and we call it, and it's in a molecule called ATP. ATP, hugely important. You need to know this. It's the high energy molecule of the body. The high energy molecule of the body or the cell. Everybody has to make the ATP. So you can't use sunlight to make your muscles move, can you? So we have to take that light energy and convert it into some kind of energy that we can use to move our muscle. And that energy is in the form of this chemical called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. How many phosphates? Adenosine triphosphate. How many phosphates? 3 of them. You have this chemical, this molecule, and if you break off chemically the first phosphate, it releases a ton of energy. Your muscle cells, there's a basic unit of the muscle called the sarcomere. And your muscle cells are like this. And when they contract, they slide against each other. ATP, I always have a little suction cups with me. The ATP latches on and allows them to slide in. When you relax, it goes back out like this. So your muscles contract and relax, contract and relax. They can do that because they have ATP. ATP, no contracting at all. So this is our energy molecule right here. So here, the energy is trapped, and I'm going to put a little circle around here. The energy that we want is trapped in the bonds. We can't use it like that. So we end up having to break apart the glucose to use it and make ATP. So the energy is in the bonds of glucose, and we break it to make ATP. This chemical your cells can use exactly the way they are to get the energy out of it. Chemical bonds have energy. That's what holds them together. So when you break those bonds, you release that energy. Okay? Questions? Up here?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, go ahead and pack it up.